Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you can all agree with me that one of the things we fail to see in South African politics quite a lot is forms of maturity. Unfortunately, there is a politician today who wants to be mature in the utterances that he has to say. And before we get on to the main news story, if I can yet again remind you, please subscribe to the channel, and if you can, comment to the video, leave a like, and if you want to support the work I do, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. So let's get on to it. So who is this politician that I'm talking about that wants to talk about maturity? And I must say I'm surprised. It's Zibi, the Rise Mzansi leader. Now, prior to the elections, we did go over the Rise Mzansi manifesto, and we also noticed their policy conference where they invited gun-free South Africa along, and can't say I was very keen on a lot of the things they were saying. In a case, he did an interview today, and he came out and he had some very interesting things to say. The first is that he says that actually, in terms of the government and national unity, the two major parties that need to quote-unquote grow up are the DA and the ANC. And I think everybody who watches this channel and watches the videos I make would see that I would tend to agree with this entirely. The ANC and the DA have engaged in numerous daily spats for some time, and in many respects it's unprofessional. It's also unbecoming of political parties. The public itself doesn't really want to see it. Yes, okay, it makes for good content for people like me who want to create videos on it, but overall it's not a good look. So what were the two areas that Zibi actually said were problematic? Well, it should come as zero surprise that the two areas are, well, the Bela Bill and the NHR bill. Obviously, these are the two most contentious bills signed under the previous administration, or agreed underneath the previous administration, when the ANC had a majority. And would you know it, they've come back to haunt the ANC. It's like everybody saw that this would happen, apart from the ANC. Now, according to Zibi, he didn't actually join the Government of National Unity, the GNU, to actually be in the executive. What he did is he joined the Government of National Unity to hold the Government of National Unity to account and try to actually get something positive out of them. Now, he says that he supports the Bela Bill. He says that it's not perfect, but on the whole, it's progressive and it does the right things that it needs to do. However, he has a completely different approach on the NHI, which he says the public health care as it currently stands cannot take over the NHI, which is effectively what the NHI bill attempts to do, and he says that the fiscal cannot afford it, which is correct, because no models on the fiscus have been done in order to determine whether or not they could actually make the NHI affordable in terms of our current tax base. So according to him, the logical thing with NHI to do would be to build on the current foundations that we have. This is the split between the public and the private, rather than build something completely new and expensive they will never be able to afford. But in any case, what he actually says that needs to happen in South Africa, he says that we need to improve health facilities with well-equipped and sufficient professional and auxiliary staff. He says at the moment, there's actually been quite a plethora of individuals leaving the public and the private sector, in many instances the countries. We've actually lost our skill to that. In many instances, that's due to what he describes as corruption, in some instances, lack of funding, and in some instances, lack of resourcing. And yes, this is correct, because underfunding in the public area means that many of those nurses do get poached by countries like Britain, where they go over there and work for the NHS for peanuts. But I mean, when you take into account the exchange rate, that peanuts seems like a lot of money. And in many instances, many of these nurses may go to Britain, live a very menial life, but obviously send the cash back to family in South Africa. The exchange rate helps. So according to Zibi, the only way to actually improve the public sector is, well, you've got to actually get their skill back. You've got to appropriately look after that staff. You've got to appropriately pay them. Because once you actually pay them and remunerate them with an appropriate salary, then lo and behold, they'll stay and do well in the industry, he says. But he says, the biggest problem that the GNU have actually is immaturity. He says that the parties there quite often have private meetings, and then they go into the public sphere and claim games of brinksmanship. Now, we all know exactly what he means. He means that Fikile Mbalula and Helen Zille have private conversations, and then Helen Zille goes to the media and says, well, if the ANC doesn't do this, we'll cancel the GNU, because, this is a no-go for us. And unfortunately, it's something that I said in a good few videos as well. It's not becoming. In many instances, that internal dynamic between the ANC and the DA is really not good. You can't have zero-sum games in any form of arrangement. And zero-sum games basically means that one side benefits whilst the other side is basically in poverty. Like, you can't do that. I know that the DA is used to being the official opposition, and the ANC is used to being, the sole dictator who can do what it wants. But in this instance, they both need to help each other. It does mean that in some instances, the ANC is actually going to help the DA, but in reverse, the DA can't just go, great, aren't we lovely, let's just destroy the ANC. I'm afraid to say the DA is going to have to help the ANC. It's got to be both sides working for each other. It's the only mature way for this to happen. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I read the headlines almost daily about all the positive investment sentiment that seems to be coming through to South Africa. Suddenly, hedge funds wanting to invest here. Suddenly, we've got the best emerging market. We've got lots of positive indicators on the horizon. But the biggest problem we seem to constantly keep having is that all of that appears to be attributable to the sentiment of the GNU, specifically the ANC, DA, and all the other pro-free market type GNU partners. Now, if the ANC and the DA destroy that through nothing more than just an internal squabble, the capital outflows are going to be huge, because everybody knows what the alternative will be. It will be a anti-capitalist or anti-market sentiment, whereby we basically get the pure commies and socialists in charge. That could mean the MK party or even the EFF. And let's face it, the problem is the investors are very slow to give South Africa an opportunity when it previously had one underneath Ramaphoria version 1.0. This is like Ramaphoria version 2.0, but you're not going to get a Ramaphoria 3.0. Like this is pretty much it. If we fail to capitalize on the investment sentiment and the development sentiment that we have right now, let's face it, we're never getting it again. So this isn't really just a political game between the ANC and the DA. This is actually a survival of the future of the country type arrangement. And if the DA and the ANC allow that to fall apart through nothing more than political infighting and two parties being completely immature, then to be frank, both parties deserve to die. That's both of them. Now, I, for one, may have bucked the trend in that I have actually said I think Fikile Mbalula, in many instances, is actually trying to play the mature game. And then in many instances, I don't believe the DA is being as mature as actually Fikile is in some instances. He has the entire alliance partners against him with his formation with the DA, and yet somehow he seems to be making it work. His own alliance partners in the SACP, he frequently tells to just do one. Now, the DA in many instances needs to do the exact same thing with its federal executive and to a degree to Auntie Zilly. Sorry, Helen, you know we love you. But at the end of the day, this is about the state of the country, not the state of the political party. So let's actually talk about those two areas of high contention, the first being the NHI. Well, apparently some prominent players in the private healthcare industry have actually approached the president and said, look, you've got two approaches here. We can all take the low road, which is we stick the NHI in litigation for the next decade, or we can all take the high road. We can actually try to help each other. They have said to the president that there are contentious issues with the NHI that you cannot resolve, many of them around the funding models, because South Africa just isn't big enough to be able to afford an NHI, coupled with the inevitable crime and corruption regimes that will end up going on in NHI. It's just doomed to failure from day one. It's never actually going to get off the ground. So what is this high road? Well, this high road is that the private healthcare sector says that it's actually underutilized whilst the public healthcare is overutilized. And it is suggesting that where there are areas where it's being underutilized and those areas actually have capacity, possibly in the form of rooms or freed up healthcare advisors that aren't currently engaged, that they could potentially subcontract their availability to the public sector so the public sector can relieve some of the pressure on it. They would obviously do this at what they quote as quote-unquote a competitive rate, and it appears to be a little bit of a hybrid NHI type model where there's this fund and they set the fund and they tell people what they can and can't accept. But in any case, apparently there are some alternatives to the current NHI being proposed by Business Unity South Africa, and there is this idea that actually there will be a requirement from the government to make concessions on NHI because the alternative is the low road alternative. And that is a decade of litigation. And no matter how much Aaron, or moron as I affectionately like to call him, is going to insist the NHI must be adopted in its current format, no questions asked, it's not really going to happen, is it? Because let's face it, there are numerous sections of the NHI that are unconstitutional and really highly questionable. So then on to the other contentious issue, and that is the Bela Bill. Well, Solidarity issued a press release today basically saying that the Solidarity movement, which is Solidarity and AfriForum, have agreed a interim proposal with NEDLAC and the Department of Basic Education. And this agreement is that basically the Bela Bill, or the Bela Act as it should effectively be known, will no longer be implement in terms of the controversial sections. Now, there is really only one main controversial section at the moment. The rest of it is just subject to implementation based on reasonableness. But anyway, the two sections are sections 4 and section 5, which is the language and the admissions policy. And the settlement that has been made is that the norms and standards and national policies and regulations that are required to adopt both the admissions and the language policies, amongst other things, must not be changed where the school is currently running at full capacity. In other words, if the school is fully utilized as an Afrikaans school and there's no room for change because there's no struggle at the school, if you will, then the language and admission policies currently in the school itself should not be subject to change. In any case, this suggestion has been made through via NEDLAC and now needs to go to the President for ratification. But it would appear that for now, this appears to be a halfway house, and the question of whether or not legislative change to the current Bela Act, whether that will be required, is still one to be debated. But this appears to be the initial compromise that would allow sections 4 and 5 to kind of progress. In any case, that's the news. So the DA, the ANC, need to kind of get their act together, act like mature parties, act like the parents in the room, stop acting like children. You can let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. Until next time, see you on Monday. Bye.